Chapter 1, The Tyranny of King Zhou. King Zhou, also known as Zhou Xin, was the last emperor of the Shang dynasty, the second dynasty in ancient China. If we say that the founding emperor of the Shang dynasty, Chengtang, as the ancestor of the 5 emperors and a descendant of the Yellow Emperor, was a wise and just ruler, King Zhou was a bloodthirsty tyrant, a disgrace to the lineage of the Yellow Emperor. As told in the ancient poems, King Zhou was a monstrous devil who slaughtered the loyal and innocent, fabricated false accusations, and wantonly massacred the old, weak, women, and children. He sought only pleasure, indulging in merriment every day and every night, neglecting state affairs and wasting his time fooling around with a consort named Daji. In those times, 4 powerful feudal lords ruled over the land: Duke Zhonghuan of the east, Duke Yi Kongyao of the south, Duke Ji Chang of the west, and Duke Chonghu of the north. These powerful dukes led 800 feudal vassals in service to the Shang dynasty. As for Daji, she was originally the daughter of Duke Suhu of Jizhu, one of the 800 feudal lords. But due to her father's refusal to bribe corrupt officials, Suhu collided with 2 of King Zhou's favored ministers, Fei Zhong and Yu Han. These 2 sought revenge and took advantage of an opportunity to choose a consort for King Zhou. They forcibly pressured Suhu into offering Daji to King Zhou. Unbeknownst to all, Daji was murdered by a fox demon on her route to the capital city, Kaoj. The demon then absorbed Daji's soul and took her form, becoming a ruthless other Daji. The tyrannical king and the fox demon became inseparable partners in crime. You could only imagine the suffering the people of the land had to endure. Faced with King Zhou's despotic rule, a group of loyalists in the court could no longer stand by. Aside from the supreme general, Wenzhong, who was commanded to lead the northern expeditions, the Prime Minister Shang Rong, Deputy Prime Minister Bai Gan, King Huangfihu, the chieftain Meibo, and the head officer of the Astronomical Bureau, Du Yuanxian, expressed their intense dissatisfaction. For Du Yuanxian, he worked overnight to complete a remonstrance, accusing King Zhou of being infatuated with beauty, indulging in debauchery day and night, and disregarding the common right, providing a severe chastisement. After reading that, King Zhou pondered silently, the criticism is not without merit. But he then turned to look at Daji and asked, "My beauty, what do you think?" Daji kneeled before him and replied, "Your Majesty, please do not listen to him. Du Yuanxian is merely bewitching and confusing your Majesty with such wayward words. I fear that once the common folk hear such words, it will create unnecessary panic and disorder. I suggest that those who spread such harmful words to incite trouble should be executed without mercy." King Zhou, hearing Daji's words, exclaimed, "Correct. That's it. My beauty is right. Quickly pass on my decree to execute Du Yuanxian and display his head for all to see." Turned in remonstrance, Prime Minister Shang Rong hurriedly interjected, "Your Majesty, we cannot do such a thing. Yuanxian is a minister whose service spans 3 generations. He speaks out of concern for the country and the people, not from personal interest." King Zhou responded, "No, Prime Minister, you just don't understand this. If we don't execute Du Yuanxian, there will never be an end to this flood of seditious words." Shang Rong wanted to remonstrate again, but King Zhou had ordered his palace guards to remove him. Shang Rong went to the study and found Du Yuanxian waiting anxiously for news. Upon delivering the horrible news, the guards roughly stripped Du Yuanxian and led him away in shackles. On reaching the Nine-Dragon Bridge, they met a high-ranking official dressed in crimson, who happened to be Higher Officer Mei Bo. He was startled to see Du Yuanxian in chains and requested an explanation. Shortly after hearing the unfortunate story, Mei Bo ordered the guards on both ends to halt and made his way into the palace. He met Prime Minister Shang Rong at the bridge and engaged him in earnest conversation. Upon speaking his piece, Mei Bo took off with Shang Rong to the palace chambers to plead for Du Yuanxian's life before King Zhou. King Zhou was increasingly impatient. "What is it again? What has Du Yuanxian done to deserve execution?" With a stern tone, Mei Bo responded, "Tradition dictates that treacherous individuals face immediate execution, sycophants are met with swift judgment, capable and virtuous ministers are held in high regard, and those with talents are rewarded generously. Should the king falter, it is the prime minister's duty to remonstrate and bring him back to righteous path. The arbitrary execution of high-ranking officials does nothing but harm to the nation." Prime Minister enraged, King Zhou retorted, "Mei Bo, you ungrateful wretch. You and Yuanxian should be punished equally. You dare to stride into the palace chambers without regard for the royal customs, deserving of the same fate as Yuanxian. But considering your years of devoted service, I'll spare you your life. However, you are forbidden from serving in any official capacity ever again. Leave my sight forever." Undaunted, Mei Bo shot back, "My lord, you have succumbed to the wicked whispers of Daji, abandoning the real responsibilities of a king. Today, if you execute Du Yuanxian, I assure you that the lives of all people in Keoj hang in the balance. Do you think that dismissing me from my position matters in light of this? What a pity. Chengtang's hundreds of years of reign are now going to be ruined in the hands of a tyrant. The return of the Supreme General is uncertain. Our nation lacks good governance and affairs are in disarray. Can I still dare to meet our forebears in the netherworld?" King Zhou snapped, "Seize Mei Bo and immediately beat him to death with the copper maces." Just as the palace guards were about to commit the act, Daji interjected, "Hold your hands. I have something to say." A smile instantly appeared on King Zhou's face. "My beauty, what do you have to say? Please speak freely." With a sly grin, Daji replied, "Your Majesty, for a minister to dare insult his liege with such foul language is nothing short of high treason. Execution is hardly adequate. Allow me to present a plan. Let's design a device that will thoroughly silence the slanderous tongues of these rebellious ministers and ensure they know their place." Intrigued, King Zhou asked, "What kind of device?" Daji explained her idea of a torture device with a chilling smile. "The device will be 2 meters high and 8 meters in diameter. It will have 3 furnace doors, and will be entirely made of copper, resembling a gigantic copper pillar. We can fill it with burning charcoal. Any rebels can be stripped naked, their bodies coiled with iron chains, and then attached to the copper pillar. In no time at all, they will be reduced to a heap of ash. This device can be called the bronze column torture." Upon hearing this, King Zhou was elated and issued an immediate command to proceed with its construction. The condemnation of Mei Bo will be deferred. But let's proceed with the beheading of Du Yuanxian. Prime Minister Shang Rong, who had heard this decree in the Hall of Longevity, let out a sigh and said to himself, "Pity, all of Chengtang's hard work is now ruined. If everything is predetermined by fate, then this country's days are numbered." Kneeling before King Zhou, Shang Rong said, "As the matter of the state is now decided, and the country is settled and peaceful, and I, as an old servant, am unable to carry heavy burdens, I beg your majesty to allow me to retire and return home." King Zhou agreed without reluctance. A few days later, Zhou called for a court session. Everyone has gathered on this auspicious day, both civilian and military officials alike, save for King Huangfu who has been absent for quite some time. He noticed 20 massive copper pillars standing in the east end of the hall. Not knowing what the pillars were for, he was puzzled. Just as he was still in his thoughts, King Zhou called for Mei Bo to be brought forward for sentencing. Guilty as charged, the fate of Mei Bo had been declared the same as his friend Yuan Xian. Marked for execution, the dreadful sight was witnessed by everyone present. Mei Bo, defiant till the bitter end, being reduced to ashes. After the execution of Mei Bo, King Zhou returned to his palace with Daji, who had been anxiously awaiting his return. Holding Daji's hand, King Zhou said, "Your schemes are deadly effective. This bronze torture pillar will be incredibly valuable in maintaining control over the state. Send for a celebration in your honor." The mingling of music and celebration could be heard throughout the palace, ringing out into the night. The Queen Mother, who was still awake in the central palace, could even hear the noises clearly.